Welcome to this video on making notes while you are studying. We have already seen, and there is plenty of information on the web, about the importance of you making your handwritten notes. Making handwritten notes in your own handwriting helps you understand the material better if you do it conscientiously and diligently. It helps you deepen your understanding of a particular subject because it has to actively engage you. And with the writing being in your own handwriting, it means you've had to translate it through your own mental processes, as well as engaging in physical activity, which helps maintain attention while you're doing it. While we can say that it is important to make notes, one of the things that is not often addressed in the videos on writing notes is, how do you actually go about making notes? What are some of the thinking processes that you go through, or could go through, that will help ensure that your notes are effective? And that's what this video is about. So we're going to take an example of some cryptography notes and use those to examine the types of questions you might ask yourself, the types of thinking you might go through to help understand the subject, or study more deeply and more clearly and be able to apply that learning more easily. One of the first things you should do is make sure that you get an overview of the subject. So you can see here, as we go through this particular video, that the person is just starting on the first page, and the handwriting is fine for the person who wrote it. Regardless of whether the handwriting is extremely neat, or whether it takes a bit of time for you to decipher, it doesn't matter. Even the neatest handwriting in somebody else's writing is not going to be as effective for you as making the notes in your own handwriting. So if you've got some notes, and here we have some notes from our cryptography subject, scan through the notes just to simply get an overview. And you can see the person here is looking through and highlighting keywords like integer, divisor, prime, so that you're beginning to get an idea of what these notes contain. While you're doing this, your brain is going, "Oh, I know something about that," or maybe asking questions or making comments such as, "I wonder what that is, I haven't seen that before." You can also see the patterns, that there are definitions, theorems, the more abstract style of writing the theorems, as well as examples on the pages. So once you've gone through and had a quick overview to get an idea of, that's what it's about, you can see more clearly that there are definitions you have to understand, and that there are examples that you are going to want to be able to relate back to the definitions and to the more abstract form of writing the theorems. Next, we want to note key terms and points of attention, so you might print the notes out. You could do it on screen, but I would recommend that you print the notes. Here you can see the person is highlighting the word integer. So you start to pay attention in a bit more detail here. Notice that you are not writing your notes yet. You're still trying to tune in your brain, and at this point asking questions like, what do I actually know about this? And why would you use that? We know that you can learn more effectively if you can relate to something that you already know. So you've probably heard about prime numbers at school, if not at any time since, and you'll have some sense of what they are even if you don't remember the definition. Just to recognize that you have heard of them before is a really useful thing in terms of you setting your brain up to absorb this new information. If there is something you haven't heard of before, then you can simply ask questions like, I wonder what that is. And to simply have acknowledged that question and to know that you have that question is going to prime your brain to seek out the answer and to be more receptive to the information when it discovers the answer. So you can see here that the person continues to go through highlighting formulas in the more abstract form, key terms like greatest common divisor, Euclidean algorithm, examples, highlighting that there are examples to review, until they get to the end, and then a quick scan through. And now the person is ready to make their own handwritten notes. Here we can see that the student has started their notes on the right-hand side of the screen, and the first thing they noted down is what integers are, and they have given an example. Now, most people have learnt about these at school, but here the student has gone on to actually see where the integers fit in the scheme of numbers. So they put some extra notes for themselves to remind them that there are such things as real numbers, rational numbers, irrational numbers, and so on, so that they can see where the set of integers fits in the general scheme. Continuing on, the student looks for the definition of divisor. Note that the person has used red for the headings so that they're clear, in this case, that they're writing down a definition. You can use a colour of your choice, but the use of colour is recommended. Choose colours that allow you to make good distinctions in the colour range. Having a definition is one thing, but it's important that you can relate the definition to real examples. So the student has taken an example based on the notes and used a different colour again to highlight that it's an example, and made sure that they can relate the numbers 72, 6 and 12 to the letters used in the definition. Continuing on, the student now notes down the definition of a prime number, and once again gives enough examples so that they can recognise the types of numbers. Now there's a theorem involving prime numbers, and it's written in a rather abstract form, as you can see there. So the next job is to relate the letters P, P1, P2, P3 through to PK, and all the indices alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 to a real-life example. Hence, this is where it's particularly important to use an example. And notice that the student in this case has drawn a little line indicating that the index 2, so you've got the number 2 to the power of 2, the index 2 is the alpha 1. The index to the integer 3 is also 2, and that is alpha 2, and so on. So they're very clear about how the numbers in the divisors, the prime divisors of that number, relate to the way the theorem is written. This pattern of working continues with the next definition on prime numbers, and again you can see the use of an example and taking particular care to make sure that the example is written out in a way that the student is then able to make sense of the more abstract way that the theorem is written. And here on the right hand side of the screen you can see that the student has continued the same pattern with the writing out of the greatest common divisor definition, the theorem involving it, and an example to make sure that they understand what the theorem is telling them. And the writing out of the example then helps you make sure that you can actually apply this particular form of knowledge. An important part of all of this, and this is as far as we're going with this example, is that the principles are the same whether you're working with summarizing some Shakespeare notes, or something for critical thinking, or the communication course, internetworking, accounting, and so on. The idea is that you first give yourself an overview. Make sure that you ask yourself important questions as you go through, such as, do I understand that? Do I remember that? If something is brand new to you, ask, how do I make sense of that? Do I understand every term in the definition? Do I have an example that helps me understand how to apply a theorem or some piece of content in some other subject that is not mathematical, for example? You'll appreciate from this that making notes is not a passive or semi-attentive exercise. It's an exercise which should fully engage you. You should be thinking, questioning, making sense of things as you go. The fact that you are writing will help you keep your mind on the job. Of course, you should take breaks as suggested, so work for 20 to 30 minutes and then take a 5 to 10 minute break. And come back and continue to do that 3 or 4 times, and then do a quick review. And then have a rest for a longer period before doing some more work. Anytime you look at your notes, you should realize that they should be easy to read. They should help you recall information. They should help you make new associations. They definitely should help you deepen your understanding of the subject as you make them and as you review them. They definitely should help you learn and remind you how to apply the content you're learning. And they should encourage you to do review sessions. It should be easy to go back to your notes if you've done them well, and it should make your studying easier than it might have been in the past. And I remind you again that the principles, the way of working, even if the content is very different, the way we've been making these notes is the same for many subjects. So good luck with your good discipline with your note making.